Hey guys, it's Alexis, aka The Soft Reader, and I'm here today to do the first video in a new series I'm looking to do on my channel that I will be dubbing Favorites Friday. Just because alliteration is easy and eye-catching. Basically the idea of this is that every Friday, or every other Friday, I haven't quite decided yet, I want to pick a topic not related to books, where I talk about my favorites in that specific topic. And the main reason being is just that while I love books, obviously, I have a lot of other things I really love. I'm very big into cinema. I love television. I love video games. I like art of all varieties. And so when I started my channel, I set out to be able to talk about all of those things as well, and I have yet to do that, so I figured setting up a platform and a series of sorts is the best way to do it. So basically, let me know down below, first off, if there are any topics you guys would like to see in future Favorites Fridays videos. Like if you would like to know maybe my favorite superheroes, or my favorite video games, or I don't know, my favorite painters, or whatever. Just let me know down below. I kind of have a couple already planned out, but I only have like a couple weeks in advance, so I definitely will be needing input, and yeah. As you can tell from that title down there, the first one I'm going to do is my favorite animes. I have a couple of caveats to start with, because don't I always? The first one is, I have been watching I'm 22 years old, and I have been watching anime since I was, God, as far back as I can remember. And like, I'm talking like since I've been 6 or 7, and that was just since I can remember. Primarily it's because I used to sit on my TV and watch Adult Swim after my parents had gone to sleep, back in the olden days when they played anime on Adult Swim really late at night. So, yes. And the other one is that the ones that I'm going to talk about in here, many of them have a manga that goes with it, that came first, or maybe even one that came afterwards, but for whatever reason, either I have still yet to read the manga, or for whatever reason, I didn't enjoy the manga. The other one I want to mention is that, I've seen, which was my main point about the other one, is that I've watched a lot of anime. And to be honest, I could list a ton of anime, that I could probably make my 50 favorite animes video, which, I'll list that if you guys want that in a future video, but, I've just seen so much of it that it's really hard for me to really narrow it down to my favorites. So I did try to pick some that were from various genres. So I tried to vary out what I picked a little, so that I wasn't just giving you all science fiction or, old school 90s anime, which I still really love a lot of those. Trigun, Yu Yu Hakusho, DBZ, stuff that I grew up with as a kid. A lot of those aren't going to be on this list, but believe me when I say that those are all still my favorites. But yeah, I've rambled on long enough, so let's just get into it. And I want to also say that these are in no particular order, because narrowing it down to the 10 I'm going to talk about is hard enough. To try and put them in any order is stupid. The first one I'm going to mention is an anime called Wolfram, and the basic premise of this is that this takes place in a dystopian, after this horrible event has kind of really changed the earth, and this anime follows 4 wolves, who actually have the ability to make themselves appear to be human, as they are on the hunt for what they call paradise, and it's meant to be a place where they can live in peace and happiness without the poverty and anger and starvation of the world they currently live in. To achieve paradise, they discovered that they need a girl made from flowers who is named Cheza, and so basically they kidnap Cheza to try and be the key to paradise, and it's basically about them trying to find paradise with Cheza. This, honestly, I can say is probably one of my top 3 favorite animes. I've seen it so many times. I've watched it probably more than this. And it's so good, and part of it is just that I love character-driven stories, and I think that the characters in this are such an important part of the story, which is why I love it as much as I do. And yeah, I mean, if science fiction dystopian with a hint of fantasy is your thing, definitely check out Wolfram because it's so good. The next one I'm going to mention is another fan favorite, but I felt like I couldn't film an anime favorites video without including it, and that is Fullmetal Alchemist. And the reason that I'm going to include the anime on this list is for the pure fact of you get 2 of them. Of course, when the original Fullmetal Alchemist anime came out, it differed a lot from the manga that it was based on. They kind of made their own story out of it after a certain point, but it still is all the same characters. They just kind of divvied off and made it into a different story. And so, and then years later they made Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is the anime that they made to follow the actual manga. So the animes tell 2 different stories. The same characters and a lot of the same early content is the same, but they ultimately tell 2 different stories. And I prefer Brotherhood objectively as a better story, but I think both have their merits, and I still think both are worth the watch. And so that's why I put Fullmetal Alchemist on this list, is just because, I mean, the same characters you get for 100 pages, you get for 100 episodes in 2 different stories, and that's kind of like an awesome deal, so. The next one I'm going to mention is one of those 90s classics, and that is Gundam Wing. So it's no surprise that I am a huge fan of mechs. I love giant robots. Anything with giant robots is right up my alley. Part of it is that I grew up watching a lot of old school Gundam anime, and there's actually 2 anime on this list that feature mechs of a certain variety, but Gundam Wing is my favorite in the Gundam franchise. There are plenty in the Gundam franchise that I think are good. I think a lot of the earlier ones definitely have their merits. I'm a big fan of G Gundam, and I thought a couple of the later Gundams were even not terrible, but Gundam Wing is by far my favorite, and this could be another one. It's just because this is the one I watched growing up, and then just the characters in this one are all really unique, and you find yourself really sympathizing with them throughout the entire thing. And just the mobile suits in this one I really love. They all have so much personality, and so that's part of my love for it too, is just like, you know, I want cool mechs. So, the next one I'm going to mention is the other mech anime I'm going to mention on this list, and that is Code Geass. And this is one that's pretty popular. It only came out, I believe, in 2008, but it's still considered a pretty popular anime. A lot of people really love it. It's probably also one of my top 3 favorite anime of all time. Basically, Code Geass tells the story of a futuristic world in which the British Empire has conquered Japan and renamed it Area 11, and they have basically made Japanese people a second-hand citizen. And it tells the story of a prince of the British Empire, Lelouch v. Britannia, as he dons a mask and becomes the face of the Japanese rebellion. And, like, I have recommended this anime to so many people, and I have not had a single person come back and tell me they didn't like it. Like, I remember when I got my brother to watch it, and he would, like, text me at 3 a.m. He'd be like, this thing just happened, and I would be like, I know, like, I'm trying to sleep, but, like, I totally will talk to you about it because I love Code Geass so much, and I stand by it as such an amazing anime. The characters are just so well thought out, and they're so complex, and then just the story is so entertaining, but also, like, heartbreaking at parts, and just, if you haven't watched Code Geass, like, if you're gonna watch one anime on this list, honestly, in my opinion, it should be Code Geass. The next anime I'm gonna mention is probably an unconventional one, but it's one that I've watched so many times, and that a friend of mine and I, when we were younger, were both really obsessed with, that I can't not recommend it because I just am so fond of it, and that is My Hime. My Hime tells the story of a young girl named Mai, who is basically going to an academy with her younger brother who has a pretty serious illness, and she's going to an academy basically on, like, an island, and when she gets there, she basically discovers that she has the magical, her and 11 other girls have the ability to summon these creatures, and they're basically supposed to fight off these evil creatures. Pretty standard. One of the reasons that I recommend My Hime, and I'll admit first off that there are a lot of very tropey things in this anime. I think it's very much a product of the early 2000s when it was made. So like, there's a whole episode about panties, that kind of thing. But one of the reasons that I really recommend My Hime is because there's not one, but two lesbian couples in this story, and I personally never felt that either one was fetishized, and I appreciated that. I really liked that one is very much blatant off the bat, and then the other one is kind of like, the whole time you're like, I think, and then it's not until later in the story actually that you discover that yes, it actually is a lesbian couple. But I felt like both were very handled differently and both have their own levels of complexity, but I never felt like it was fetishized in any way. Of course, with the one, you're kind of like, oh no, is this queer baiting? And then like, surprise, it's actually a lesbian couple. So that's one of the reasons that My Hime has always stayed in my heart, is because of watching it and just all of the OTPs in that show. Like, all of the relationships in that show you root for. And that is all I'll say about that. But My Hime is good. I mean, if it's worth the watch if you don't mind some of the really, really early 2000s tropey stuff in anime. The next one I'm going to mention is Darker Than Black. The original series, I still recommend the follow-up series and the prequel, but mostly just the original. It's so good. And Darker Than Black basically tells the story of a city, is basically in the future there have been these two calamities, one in South America and one in Japan, where basically whole cities have just vanished. And these like walls have gone up overnight basically, and it's tells the story of now there are these people called contractors who have special abilities, and so you basically are following this like anti-governmental organization and their kind of main front man, and an assassin who works for them named Hay, as basically he is working for this anti-governmental organization while also fighting contractors and also trying to solve the mystery of Hell's Gate, which is this, you know, walled-in space where this incident has happened. It's definitely a good mix of fantasy sci-fi, and every 2 episodes is a different, like, story within the main story, so it's really good to just watch, like, 2 episodes, a whole little arc is done, and then you can move on. But it's just so good. It's definitely one of those anime that's really bittersweet, but that you come to really, really love some of the main core characters. And also just, I really like a lot of the superpowers that are in the show. I felt like they weren't, some of them are definitely kind of overdone, but then some of them you see and you're like, wow, that's a really interesting take, or that's a really interesting take on that concept. And so I do think that there is a very interesting level of originality to it, and I highly recommend it. The next anime I'm going to mention is one of the funniest anime I have ever seen in my life, and that is Gekkan Shoujo no Zaki-kun, and it's so funny. This is probably the only, I think, maybe slice of life anime I have on this list, but basically Gekkan Shoujo no Zaki-kun tells the story of Chiyo, who basically confesses to her crush one day, Nozaki, and Nozaki is kind of, you know, spacey, and he mistakes her confession of love as a confession to want to be his assistant, and it turns out that Nozaki is actually a mangaka for a really popular shoujo series. So everyone thinks he's a woman, and it turns out that he's this like big guy who draws really, you know, girly shoujo manga. And so basically Chiyo, all the while still harboring a crush on Nozaki, basically becomes his assistant and kind of learns about the world of mangakas and, you know, how mangas come to be. And again, this is another one where the cast of characters are so hilarious but interesting but quirky, and it's so much fun. Like, this anime, again, like I said, is probably one of the funniest anime I've ever seen, but also like your side hurts from laughing so hard because it's so good. Like, it's so fun, and there's so many, like, when I think of, like, funny moments in my head, there's, like, 50 of them that pop out, so it's good. If you're looking for a really lighthearted, funny anime, check it out. The next one I'm going to mention is the only sports anime I'm going to put on this list. And look, guys, it was really hard to choose one, because I love sports anime, okay? I could talk about how I stuck through Kuroko no Basket for how many episodes I did and how many times I cried watching it as the teams I loved lost. I could talk about Yuri on Ice, but the one I chose is Yowamushi Pedal. And Yowamushi Pedal tells the story of Onoda Sakamichi as he's starting high school, and he's kind of really excited to start high school, and he thinks he's going to go to high school and he's going to join the anime club because he's a huge otaku, and he's going to join the anime club and he's going to make friends, and it's going to be everything he's ever wanted. And he gets to high school and finds out that the anime club at his high school has actually been disbanded. And so basically over a course of events, he ends up with a different club, which is the Sohoku Cycling Club. And he basically ends up part of their cycling team. And I recommend this one as an anime over any of the others for two reasons. The first is that bicycling as a sport, I feel like, is the most universally easy to understand. I mean, there are rules in cycling and there are strategies in cycling, but it's nowhere near as complicated a sport as volleyball or as basketball, and it's not as term specific, I feel like, as figure skating. And the other one is because something that Yowamushi Pedal has that none of the others do is that at the end of every episode of Yowamushi Pedal, there's a 10-second clip or an omake where it doesn't have anything to do with the plot of that particular episode, but it's just meant to be a funny 10-second clip at the end of every episode. And they're so funny, and they're just meant to be like a little, you know, interaction between two characters, or just, you know, stuff like that, and they're just meant to be fun. That's the whole point of them. And literally sometimes they're so good because you'll get through like a really tense episode of Yowamushi Pedal, and then here comes this 10-second omake, and it's perfect. And you're just like, I love this. This is so good. So as an anime, Yowamushi Pedal is the one I recommend over all the others. The next anime I'm going to mention is one that I also feel is pretty popular, and that is Psychopath. But I am trash for dystopians, so it was no surprise that this one was going to make it on this list. But I also just think that the idea of Psychopath is really original, and I feel like the characters are very authentic and interesting. Psychopath basically tells the story of a futuristic Japan where people are labeled by their crime coefficient, which is basically where, like, walking on the street, you'll be scanned and you're measured for how likely you are to commit a crime. And there is a branch of the government who basically are meant to handle people who have really high crime coefficients, who are really likely to commit crimes. And so you basically follow a new inspector named Akane, who is sent into, obviously, this branch of the government, and she is basically learning and getting to know her teammates and the people who also work in her department, while also kind of being introduced to this government conspiracy. And so it literally has all of the ticks of like a classic dystopian, but in like an anime form where there are cool guns that blow people up. There you go. That's what it's about. There you go. The final anime I'm going to mention is a classic anime to many, but it's one that I feel like I can't make a video without mentioning, and that is Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop is one of both me and my brother's favorite anime. Basically, Cowboy Bebop tells the story of the crew of a ship called Bebop, which is kind of, they're bounty hunters, but they kind of get into these shenanigans throughout the show, but they also all have their own personal histories that kind of come throughout the show and kind of make appearances. The main character you follow is an ex-mobster named Spike Spiegel, who is part of the Bebop, and so like the later half of the story is a lot about him confronting his like ex-mobster life. And a huge part of it takes place in space. It's futuristic. There is a hilarious little girl character and a dog. But Cowboy Bebop is such a classic in the anime community, and it's so good. And one of the things that I will say about Cowboy Bebop that's absolutely just phenomenal is the music. The music in that show is amazing. A lot of it is jazz music that's played kind of throughout the show, and it's phenomenal. Like, it's really, really good, and it just totally sets the mood, and it drags you into the story, and yeah, I mean, I feel like there's nobody alive who's not seen Cowboy Bebop, but if you're watching this video, if you've made it through this video, and you haven't watched Cowboy Bebop, alright guys, so basically that is a list of my favorite anime. I knew this video was not going to be short because I had a list of 10 and I knew that I was going to kind of ramble about them because I love them so much. These are all anime, by the way, that I have seen multiple times with the exception of, I think, Mushi Pedal. I think that's the only one I've watched once, but I also did sit through 2 seasons and a movie about it, so I feel qualified to say I love it as much as I do. But you guys should let me know down below if you've seen any of these anime, if you have any opinions about them, if any of these are your favorite, or if you have a favorite anime you would like to recommend to me. You know what? Props if you can name an anime I haven't seen yet. But I'll see you guys soon with another video, next Friday for another favorites, and we'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!